work and play can really coexist. When we play, when we interact with people, we have more communication, and then that communication leads to at least 5 times more creativity, and then open communication also results into at least 4.5 times higher talent retention. More than 80% of executives think that lack of communication is the main reason to lead to workplace failures. So if you don't want to fail, there's a whole lot of use and value to really invest into at least one intervention that is applied to these methodologies.
Your most mind-altering hour of the week. Hi, you're listening to SHFT Happens, and I'm your host, Ina.
In the world, globally right now, there are about 25 million meetings that are being organized every single day. 25 million meetings. Chances are that you just came out of one, we're about to go into one as we speak. So meetings are all over, we cannot avoid them, but at least we can take control and agency over how we lead them and organize them. In the studio with me today is Emy Mylona, and she's a learning and development professional who has cracked the code to engaging meetings. And she's here to share her methodology with us. Emy, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's nice to have you. You work at Rituals, and in your free time, you're also a freelance professional expert on driving engaging meetings. Is that correct?
Exactly.
So if you could, in 2 sentences or less, tell our listeners why they should stick around.
Meetings, as you said, are part of our daily lives and we cannot avoid them. There's so many statistics showing about meeting fatigue and how people feel unproductive and drained. And in this podcast, we're going to show practically how to transform these meetings into engaging moments that boost collaboration, creativity, and leaves us feeling more connected.
And I think this is such a relevant topic because whether it's online or whether it's in person, we're still having way too many meetings. Exactly. At the very least, we can make them into something fun. So you told me that you developed a methodology, which is like a very simple 3-steps approach, and I cannot wait to dive into it. We're going to even demo it, so that's very nice. But before we do so, typically SHFT Happens is about making transformations or making a shift. Sometimes shit happens in our lives. What was your SHFT Happens moment?
I think when I moved to the Netherlands and I started working in these different scale-ups and startups, I started to see a pattern. There were companies that were really in favor of meetings. There were companies who were trying to find a way to make meetings more effective, but couldn't really crack it. And I also experienced firsthand how draining it can be to sit around in a 1-hour meeting, 2-hour meeting, with a lot of people without clear agendas, without clear distinction of roles, and then just leaving feeling like, oh, what did we accomplish here today? So I thought it's such an interesting topic that a lot of people cannot live without because, let's face it, meetings are not going to go away. And it also reminded me of when I also used to work together with different teams or volunteering and how different teams in volunteer organizations work so nicely together and can collaborate, even though they started as a group of strangers. And I wanted to bring this approach that I learned when I was volunteering to the workplace, because I feel like we spend so much time together, yet we don't really know each other, and then yet we're expected to complete a series of projects and tasks, and then we don't really know how, because nobody just sticks around and say, hey, this is how you collaborate, this is how you communicate, this is how you effectively listen. So these topics are super important to me, and I feel that everybody feels this frustration. So I'm here to also share my practical tips that I also share with other companies, and I've seen it working in practice.
And you lead workshops and trainings on these subjects as well in your free time.
Exactly. I'm also doing teamwork workshops, leading teams to brainstorm better, communicate better, trust each other, and also solve problems.
That's very nice. And you mentioned volunteering, and I feel that that's a nuance for a specific reason. Would you like to highlight it a bit?
Yeah, I think so. When I was studying, I was part of a lot of volunteer organizations. And I think that also allowed me to work with different kinds of people, different cultures, different backgrounds. And then the task was very simple, just carry out a conference or carry out a project or an event, support an event. And then I learned that the methodology that you follow there is just team building, I mean, you bring a group of people that didn't know each other before, but then have the same task in mind. And then you have to connect with them and to make them work together to carry out an event. So it's a big responsibility, and you do it also for free. So people are very, very motivated to connect because it's very fun. And then I feel like I saw this similarity also in the workplace, but the fun is not there. So I really had such a nice experience volunteering and giving back, and to also develop this framework to adapt it to the modern workplace. And I saw a lot of projects being such huge success by people who were at the time 18 or 19. So I was like, okay, maybe something works here. There is something that we miss. So I wanted to bring and incorporate it to the modern work.
It's very nice. And it makes sense that you would take something, observing people who are dedicated and passionate and doing work from the bottom of their hearts. Obviously, they wouldn't do that unless they would be passionate about that specific task that they're performing at that moment in time. And then if you give them the freedom, okay, how can we make it more efficient? How can we make it better? And you see creativity at play and innovation at play and trying new things, and where they have all this space and opportunity to do so, it makes sense that you would observe something organically occurring, which typically maybe in a corporate environment, in a more paid setting, it maybe doesn't take place as easily and effortlessly. Yeah. I'm wondering why that is, but that's a very philosophical conversation that we could have maybe at another point in time. I guess we promised the methodology, so maybe we can stick to that plan. I love philosophical conversations.
Me too.
What kind of meetings are we talking about? Because when I say meeting, everybody has a different association in mind. Is it are we talking about one-on-one? Is it a conversation with your spouse? Is it a phone call with the doctor? Is it a team meeting? Is it an event? Is it a town hall?
It can be anything, really. It's very wide, of course. I know this is the definition of a meeting is any kind of interaction that happens between one or more people. Of course, you can narrow it down by saying, okay, in a workplace, what is a meeting? And I think this is where I focus, because I'd love to develop methodologies for also personal interactions, but let's focus on meetings for this one. And when it comes to meetings, of course, it can be anything. It can be a team meeting, it can be a company event, it can be a retrospective meeting, it can be a brainstorming activity for the team. It can be a session where we set goals for the new year, or a session where we celebrate the successes of last year. So this methodology can really apply it in every situation, as long as you have probably a team with you. So it can be 2 or 3 or more people attending. It can also be virtual or on-site. It doesn't really matter. The methodology can be adjusted to the different settings. And then the flow also depends on what is your outcome? Because in my methodology, I'd like to start from the end goal and then reverse engineer it to what do we want to accomplish and how do we get there? So if, for example, let's say we have a brainstorming session about developing a new process, the end goal should be to have a lot of creativity and a lot of innovative approaches. So starting from that point, what sort of activities do we have to plan so that it's very intentional? How do we get there?
And I hear, we've spoken about this before, and I hear a lot of passion in your voice about this specific methodology, obviously for specific reasons. You've probably applied it before, and you've noticed some benefits or some results that you thought, wow, this is what this methodology can accomplish if you apply it well.
Yeah, of course. Well, it already starts, as I said, from my volunteering years. I saw how people really develop their professionals and break out of their shell, and how they try to connect with other people. So I've seen the group dynamics happening in front of me, and how the energy of the group changes, and how people who maybe, for example, they had a lot of strong opinions, at the end of the day, they are able to make a consensus. And transferring this to the workplace, I think it's very beneficial to also notice that when people are put in the spot for a specific subject, let's say that we organize a feedback sharing session, I think that people feel the need to behave a certain way, so they're conditioned to act more professionally or to show it a specific mask, let's say, of I need to be serious about this or I need to say the right thing. But in my framework and in my approach, I put the play into the topic, and then people feel less on a spot, feeling less judged. And in that setting, it's way more easy for people to just say whatever they think, because they know that this is a safe environment. And that is my intention, to create a safe environment that people do not feel like I should say this or that, but instead really saying what they feel and act the way that they feel, because it's just a game. Or at least it's masked this way, because we know that it's more than that. So I think in terms of how it has worked, I've worked with companies before that wanted to share feedback more openly. So in my process, I took them from a seemingly innocent play, let's say, of getting to know each other, sharing thoughts, sharing feedback, forming different connections and different traits that they didn't know about each other before. So we already have a base of, oh, I know a lot more about you, so I'm connected to you. And then also playing some games that require that I trust you. So, for example, I let myself go, or I trust that you, if I fall, you will catch me, in a very, very literal sense. And then afterwards, having conversations that if I trust you and I know you, then I also can communicate with you better. And then I trust you that we will solve this challenge together. So this feeling of connection and togetherness can really help us to make it to the next phase. So these companies have really started from a point of, our energy is all over the place. We have maybe very strong voices, or we have managers in the room, and then other employees feeling less of a chance to speak out. And then at the end, we go through this entire journey of everybody is the same, everybody has the same opinion, we all listen to each other, and then this energy with this intervention is navigated to the right place. So it really does work, but I've seen also that there is hesitance and there is resistance in the beginning, because people don't know this kind of approach. And then when they hear about, oh, and we are playing a game, they're kind of a little bit hesitant as to, is this professional enough? But I really invite people to challenge themselves and to try something new. And this is why I'm here today, to really show with the demo that it is possible to just have a very different setting, very different to what you're used to, but still have the same effects, even better than like a very straightforward workshop on a specific topic.
And when we talk about openness or developing more connectivity and connection between people, I feel that applies to way beyond meetings and events, right? I mean, it applies to so many different moments that matter within an organization, and it can apply to the psychological safety. It can contribute to more of that. It can contribute to better teamwork, obviously. And I'm sure there are statistics that are showing that this is like creating is the baseline or the foundation for more productivity, which at the end of the day, every organization is craving more productivity.
Yeah, of course. There are a lot of studies out there. If we start from the scientific studies of what happens when we play, of course, there are so many chemicals in our brains that are produced when we are engaging in gamified activities like oxytocin, serotonin, all these happy reward chemicals. And of course, gamification also taps into our natural needs for curiosity and innovation. So all of these things happening in our brain, and we feel better, we feel more open, we feel less inhibited, and then also that leads to more collaboration, and then that more collaboration also leads to more job satisfaction. So we see that, for example, statistics tell us that when we play, when we interact with people, we have more communication, and then that communication leads to at least 5 times more creativity, and then open communication also results into at least 4.5 times higher talent retention. So there's a lot of things that can be connected to how we interact with each other. So communication, creativity, collaboration leads to more productive teams, leads to higher job satisfaction, and we can see it everywhere we look.
Okay, we're sold, I think. Give me the 3 steps. What are the 3 steps?
All right, so there are 3 main steps. The first one is the get to know stage. So the get to know stage is all about forming connections. So of course, I know you, we work together, we spend at least 8 hours a day. And I know that you live in that area, and I know that you have a dog, and maybe I know that you have, 2 siblings. But then what are the common interests? So there's an activity that I like to play, which is called 2 truths and 1 lie. So let's say that we play this game, and then if I was in a setting of teams, I would say, okay, everybody pair up with someone that you don't really know. Or you
so let's pretend that we are there and we're in that team and we're playing this game.
Exactly. So let's say that we are paired up together. Ideally, if I would facilitate this game, it would be that you and me might be working in different projects, or you might not have so many overlapping times in the day where we collaborate. So I would ask everybody to say, okay, so in the next 5 minutes, discuss with each other, and find 3 statements. 1 statement must be a lie, and 2 statements must be a truth.
Okay.
So, and then at the end of these 5 minutes, everybody comes together. Let's say we are a team of 10, and then every pair presents something about their partner. And then I need to present about you 2 truths and 1 lie. And then the rest of the group needs to say which one is the lie. So that leads also to conversations around, you look like a swimmer or you don't look like a dog person. So there's a lot of also funny things happening. Okay, so let's say that we're talking with each other. I need to also say 3 things about myself.
Yep.
And you say 3 things about yourself.
So we just name them one after each other.
Exactly.
Okay, so I start?
Yeah.
All right. True. I don't have to mention which is true or not true, right?
You need to tell me. Well, in the setting of a team, I would present it about you. But in this setting, let's say that you tell me 3 statements and then I will guess.
Nice. That's even more exciting. Okay, so I was born in Moldova. Statement number 1. I have a very linear career path. Statement number 2. And I published a book. Statement number 3.
All right. Based on what I kind of know about you, I would say the second one is a lie. The linear career path.
Yeah, right. That's good.
Perfect.
Very good.
And then, of course, that also leads to, okay, what is non-linear about your career path? So it sparks conversations, and then with this conversation, we get to know each other a little better.
Yeah, so the non-linear part about the career that I've had is that if you look at it in as individual chapters, you would not really make sense of it. It would be like individual puzzle pieces, but when you put them next to each other, you see that the picture makes sense, right? So for example, how would you put together, if you're looking individually at the job, working in multimedia design or brand development, for example, and then next publishing a book, and then next learning to train emotional intelligence and doing psychometric assessments. Then this podcast, right? If you take all these individual pieces about me, then you say, well, this is quite a fragmented career. But if you would look at it holistically, you would see that communication is the central piece, and the red thread would be also the adaptability and the drive for innovation, drive for something new. I need to be inspired. I need to be excited about something novel or a new point of view. Insights if I get an insight, it feels like an orgasmic thrill in my body. I love having insights.
Amazing. And you see what happens here is there's a whole new world for me to learn about you. There's so many things that I can talk to you about afterwards. And this is a connection moment of, I also don't have a linear career path. Maybe we can connect in our common passion about this specific topic. So after this game, it's not like, I say just 3 statements and then it's the end of it. Like we can also discuss about, hey, you say that your one true statement is that you were born in Moldova. I also have friends from Moldova. What is your favorite place?
Right.
So it's continuous after that. And then what I really like is that team building also happens when the game has ended, because it doesn't stop there.
But what I like about what you're saying, and I want to nuance it a little bit more, is that it's not about having topics for conversation. That's not the point. I mean, it's not about talking about the weather or having an additional topic next to the weather. It is about connectivity. So connecting points is like you can have neurons in your brain, but if they're not connected with each other, they don't become ideas. Yeah. So that's what I like about this. All right, your 3 statements now.
All right, let's see. So my first statement would be that I love horse riding, and I have already bought a horse in Greece, where I'm from. The second statement is that I play volleyball in a professional club. And then the third statement would be that my first job was in sales in a tourist shop in Athens.
I have a feeling the horse statement sounds too polished for me to be true. Is that correct?
That is the lie. We know each other so well.
Well, it sounded more like something that you would have as a dream. I do see you riding a horse for some reason. You look to me like the type of a person who would like horse. I just had a beautiful coaching session with a horse. So it's right? Oh, what a beautiful animal. So I totally see you as a person who would be riding a horse. And I could see maybe in Greece somewhere there is a horse waiting for you. But I can't put my finger on it why I felt that it was too polished up versus the other one.
I think you're really on spot, because that was actually my childhood dream, like opening a farm for horses and owning my own horse. But I do love horse riding, but the second part of the statement was a lie.
Well, maybe it's a lie for now. Maybe it's a dream for the future. All right, so that would create then a room for us to go deeper into this conversation. I mean, obviously, I could now continue deviating from our subject in order to go deeper into getting to know you, which is a lot of fun. So I can tell that it changes the energy between us, right? I mean, viewers will also observe that there is a different dynamic now here.
Yeah.
That you brought with this first exercise. Number 2, you had a second step to your methodology.
Yes. So now we kind of have formed our commonalities and points of connection, and we have a reference point, so we're feeling a little bit more open to each other, a bit more connected. So the next step is, how do we collaborate? How do we actively listen to each other? How do we work together? So the first step is get to know. The second step is get to connect and get to collaborate. So it's dual. And then there are also exercises where we encourage active listening. So there's one group exercise that unfortunately we cannot play now, but I think it's very, very interesting, because in a group setting, we ask everybody to count to 20. And then there are 3 rules. Not one person can say 2 numbers consecutively. If 2 or more people talk at the same time, they need to start over. And then all people have to participate. So imagine that we are in a room and we have, I don't know, anywhere from 5 to 20 people, and everybody needs to be super coordinated to count to 20. And then if they succeed, which usually they don't, they need to do it faster. So they say that it takes also like 20 seconds for a group of 10 to complete. And then my challenge would be, can you do it faster? So it also leads to, okay, how do we listen to each other? And then when I've played this game, a lot of people just jumped in and they wanted to say all of the numbers at the same time, and they wanted to be the first one to complete it. But then it doesn't lead to anything, because they're just one person in a whole group. So they need to connect, and they need to listen to if someone just takes a breath to speak. It needs to be very quiet in the room. So it's also a nice game to manage the energy. If you have a group of a lot of people talking at the same time, and a lot of people sharing their opinion. So let's say we're in a brainstorming session and then people just want to pitch in. This is a nice game to just manage this energy and to make sure that everybody just takes turns in talking. So
if I am to understand it correctly, we're not talking about 3 steps. What we're talking about here is 3 toolkits, like 3 separate toolkits to accomplish specific outcomes. So in the first case, it was the connection. The purpose was connection. And in this case, it's about collaboration.
Yes.
So we had connection, collaboration, and in these toolkits, you have specific exercises or games which people can plug and play depending on their circumstance or situation for their specific setting.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, exactly.
All right. And step number 3, or toolkit number 3 is?
Tool number 3 is solving challenges together. So it's all about problem solving, and then we're going to the end of the journey, which is completing a task, right? So this is much more about having proper conversation, reaching consensus, and decision making. Because in the beginning we said, okay, we need to get to know each other, we need to form commonalities, we need to be connected to actually communicate. Then the second step is, how do we collaborate? How do we listen to each other? How do we make sure that you and I combine our strengths in order to get to the third step, which is actually, okay, this is the task at hand, and we need to make sure that it happens. So how does it happen is that we have set the base, that we really have all the foundational knowledge that we have to know about each other or about the team in order to make sure that we are successful. And one nice game that I like to play, and I have played also in my workshops, is called the plane wreck. So the plane wreck is a game of conversation. So it takes about, let's say, 10 to 15 minutes, and then there's a scenario that as the facilitator or the host of the meeting can introduce to the team. And it's very, very simple. You transport your team to a deserted island, and you say that you're kind of in an episode of Lost. So you have stranded in a deserted island. You're being part of a plane wreck, unfortunately, and you have 10 minutes to go back to the plane and secure 5 items that will safeguard your survival in the island as long as you're there.
Okay, so the plane has crashed and we're sitting with a couple of people on the island, and I need to run back into the airplane, which is still there somehow. But I need to really quickly save some items, right?
Exactly.
And then you're asking, how many items did you say?
So there's a list of 10 items and you need to select 5 because supposedly you have 10 minutes to go back to the plane to collect it, and then the plane just explodes.
Okay, so then if I'm collecting items there, then I'm thinking of, for example, a blanket or something that can isolate me from either cold or the sun. So I definitely would need something like that. What would be your number 1 item?
I would have something about food or sustenance. So if it's maybe water purification tablets or any sort of food cans to secure my survival afterwards, because I don't know what's in the island. I don't know if things are edible or not. I don't know if there's wild animals, so I need to secure my
And can we share? Because if you get 5, I get 5, then we have 10 together. Or is it every man for himself?
That would be the easiest. But the point of the game is that if you have 10 items and you have only time to secure 5, and you need to make sure that you have a consensus as a team. So the added challenge is that, let's say we're a group of, 5-10 people, and we all need to make sure that we decide collectively as a group that these are the 5 items that we agreed on. And what happens there is that there's an interesting conversation because every person has different priorities, right? So you said something about blanket and I said something about food. And then, if let's say, we can get the blanket and the food, and then there is, for example, a compass, or there's a mirror, or there's a torch, for example, or something else that maybe some people do not agree. And then what happens there is that you also need to maybe convince the other person of your opinion, or you also need to step down, because at the end you need to have a consensus. So how the people who have very strong opinions make sure that they also adhere to the other people of the group, or the people who do not really participate also have a chance to speak, because ultimately their vote also counts. And then you also observe different behaviors of the group. Like, does the group vote? Does the group listen to the other people's opinions? Do the strong people in the group lead the conversation and some others just lean back? So there's a lot of things happening in this conversation.
Right, I can imagine. So let's imagine that we have identified certain people are having a more dominant attitude or behavior. Is the purpose of this game then eventually to correct them?
The purpose of the game is more that the group corrects them. So the facilitator or host of the game is not there to impose a certain direction. And I think that's the most powerful effect of this methodology, is that the group agrees and reaches their own conclusions and ultimately can follow up on those conclusions because it's theirs. So if someone else outside of the group just comes in and say, you need to do this, maybe the group rejects it or they follow it, but it's not intrinsic. So if the group can really by themselves say, this is what happened within our group, this is us, because we're a team. Because up until that point, we formed a team because we connected, we collaborated, we solved challenges, and this is the last step of the process. We need to overcome this. So the group cohesion, by that point, is supposed to be very, very strong. So the outsider effect in that moment will not have a lot of results. So what we want to do is that after this game, because the game is not meant to be won or lost, it doesn't matter if they reach a consensus or they don't, because either way, you have so much food for discussion. So afterwards, you can say, if they reached a consensus, how did they come to about that? Does everybody feel that they were heard? Does everybody feel that they contributed? And then you have, as a facilitator or a host, feedback questions or debriefing questions, as I like to call them, about what happened, how did you feel, what were your findings, and how you will incorporate these findings for the future. And this is the nice bridge that I make at the end of this workshop. How do you connect what you've learned in these games to the real life scenarios? Because if we say that we need to, agree on a specific way of working, how do we make sure that we actually reach a consensus and we make a decision when everybody is feeling heard? So this is a nice bridge, let's say, to a work situation. And then if, for example, people have failed and they didn't reach a consensus at the right time, what they can learn from this so that next time when it's a real life scenario, they can work and they can connect better together and also listen to each other or whatever happened wrong in the scenario, then they can also improve the next time around.
So for me, this sounds like very much like a tool for understanding the dynamics, both within the context of the team, but also of the individuals themselves. Mm-hmm. And it's more of a behavioral, psychological tool rather than how to drive meetings themselves. Is that correct? Should I understand it this way?
Yeah. So it's very indirect. And I think the approach is that we don't really go into this methodology saying that these are the correct manners, but instead the methodology is to lead the group to navigate these situations and understand more about themselves as a group and as a team and how they can work together. And at the end of this journey, they find some results and some ways of working that is unique to them as a group, and then they can apply it. But it's not necessarily that this is the correct methodology and these are the 10 results that you need to come afterwards, because I'm very sensitive to every group is different, every person is different, every group dynamic is different, and then the way that they work together is very unique to them. So they need to come up with how do we make sure that everybody in the team feels included, feels heard, how do we connect, how do we work together, what are the different strengths that we can use from each other. And this is something that is very tailored to each group. So there's not like one size fits all methodology. It's more like these are the toolkits, and then the way that they are applied is very different to every team.
I remember the first date that I had with my husband, and I applied a gamified methodology to identify his personality. And that created food for thought, just one half an hour conversation. If it's guided and if it's structured in this way, it gives so much content and meat that you can work with, right? So I remember that still till to this day, we're still talking about that day and that moment when we had that first meeting, which we thought it would be a business meeting, but ended up to be a date. And eventually, because we applied such a technique, it created a memorable experience. So I can see this almost being applied also in groups and of friends, like when we come together and I'm seeing some friends tonight, I'm already thinking this is fun to do also just to try out with friends. Obviously, I don't know all the exercises, but with the exercises that I have already. I'm thinking about having worked in the corporate world for a very long time. Everybody's busy. You know that. I mean, very rarely a manager will say, oh, let's introduce another gamified experience here because we want to know the dynamics of the group and we want to improve them. Somehow this doesn't seem to be on the radar. Most of the time there are other priorities. There are more important things to do. What do you say to them?
Yeah, that's a very common use case for me. And also I think it also translates to learning as a whole. Trainings used to be very direct, and then we need a training that will solve all of our problems. It needs to be quick and fast and produce results immediately. So I think it's very interesting for me to say, okay, you don't have time, but then think about how much time is lost for unproductive meetings. Let's say that we want to have a goal setting session, and then let's say we have a meeting, and then for 1 hour people just talk all over each other, and then people feel that they are not heard, people feel that things are not agreed upon, or that their opinion is not really respected. Imagine the effect that the feelings of these people will have later on. People will feel unmotivated, people will feel checked out, they will not contribute as much, and then that would lead to a goal setting session that produced goals that are not really followed up upon because people are not really connected to them. So I know it's a very difficult thing because it's sometimes it feels like you don't really have something concrete, but the intangible effects of unproductive meetings can be felt throughout the organization. And actually, there's a statistic that says that more than 80% of executives think that lack of communication and open communication is the main reason to lead to workplace failures. So if you don't want to fail, there's a whole lot of use and value to really invest into at least one intervention that is applied to this methodology. So it doesn't need to be a whole day of event. It needs to be integrated. And my approach is to integrate in moments that are already there, but transform the way that they are delivered. So let's say, for example, that your company already has a team event every year, because most companies organize these team events, or they have a company event at the end of the year to celebrate these achievements. Integrate these methodologies in one of the sessions instead of doing a workshop on how to deliver feedback, how to use, how to be more innovative in your approach. These things exist and we do them, but how about just turning them on their heads, and instead of saying, okay, we will watch a lecture that maybe people will just not watch all the way to the end, we introduce an activity that is actually more engaging. And instead of doing a team meeting of an hour to brainstorm or a new process, dedicate 10 minutes of this meeting to do a brainstorming exercise, and then people will have a very different outlook afterwards. I think what I encourage people to do is to start small. Usually I encourage people to start with an icebreaker or an energizer in the beginning of the meeting and just observe how this meeting goes afterwards. When I have started, especially also in my company, I have started doing energizers and icebreakers in the meetings that are longer. So if it's more than an hour, we start with an icebreaker. The feedback that I have gotten after this and the participation and the engagement that there is so much different. So try this, and I think I can share also with the audience a nice handbook of energizers and ideas on quick icebreakers. Just try one or two, see what happens, and then if you're convinced, then you can continue to incorporate more and larger activities.
Oh, perfect. And this playbook that you're mentioning, can we have a PDF or something downloadable, which we can attach to the description of this episode? This brings back, going back to our analogy, making the circle complete of where we started about horses and your vision of horses. It makes me think about how nature does these things that we have to unfortunately orchestrate and really strategize about. Nature does it very organically. And if you're looking at, for example, a herd of horses, horses are A, herd animals, so team collaboration. And B, they are running, so they want to get away. They want to make sure that they're most efficient at running, right? So I forgot how it's called. There's a specific term for it. So if you're watching this and you know the term, please drop it in the comments. And as soon as you introduce a new element into the experience or the herd, it's super beautiful to observe what these horses will start to do. So the first priority that they have is to scan, is this object a threat or not a threat? And B, is this, if you're not a threat, and obviously very little things are a threat. I mean, we're not living now in a jungle, right? So a human being will typically not be viewed as a threat. A human being is being assessed from the perspective of collaboration and teamwork. So they look at you almost like another horse, Mm-hmm. And their intention is to first identify, well, where are the blockages or gaps that this person has that might impede her from being part of this herd, and therefore slow us down in terms of when we try to run and be efficient. So then you will notice that they start to walk around you, they start to sniff you, and they're suspicious. And then through their behavior, they're clearing out, in a sense, your whatever blockages that they sense within you, especially emotional. Most of the time, humans come with traumatized bodies, with all sorts of traumas, all sorts of stress, and you'll see the horse reacting to that. So they'll start to shake, or they'll throw themselves on the floor, or they'll rub their body against some fence. And then once they feel, okay, I've completed this session, it takes usually about half an hour to an hour. Once they've noticed, okay, I've completed the session, now she's quite clear and it's okay, then they start to show curiosity. Oh, let's have a look. Oh, let's come closer. Let's give her a kiss, or let's give her a lick, or she's okay for me to be pet, And that's so interesting that this is also very gamified, a playful approach for at how nature is doing exactly what you're describing. And yeah, there's a lot we can learn from that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it really taps into how playful we feel like to be in the workplace. And I think one of the parts that I feel that is very different to compare to when I was volunteering to now is that when I was volunteering and when people are younger and not in the workplace, they just feel much more open, and this sense of innocence of playing as we had when we were kids is lost in the workplace. And I think this is, for me, it's very, very sad, because there's so many benefits that we have from play. We have creativity, we have innovation, we have a sense of belonging, a sense of we're in this together. We don't have inhibitions. We feel less aware of ourselves, and we have fun. And then I think the what I try to really incorporate is that work and play can really coexist in a way that is very organic and it makes sense. And I think if people want to challenge their mindset that, so far we've seen that, as you said in the beginning, meetings happen so often, and there's so many statistics out there that show that there is a fatigue, that there is unproductivity, that meetings leave us feeling drained, and the percentages are staggering, more than 80%. So if all of these things are not going well, then how about we challenge ourselves and say, hey, you know what, let's incorporate something that is seemingly a stranger to this room, but incorporate it in a way that feels organic. And I think if we really tap into this natural, organic sense of playfulness and innocence and openness, then we can really make something. And then that leads, I've seen it happening in teams, in workplaces, and it doesn't matter if your team is on site, if your team is virtual, if your team is working in different countries or different cultures, this can be applied anywhere. And it can be tailored to any team. And I think that's the beauty of it, is that you don't really need to have, okay, this is the toolkit, and then you just have to just
follow the checkbox.
Exactly. Like, it's not a box. It can really be tailored to what your team needs. And it can be easily adapted. Of course, in the beginning, I will also encourage people to look out for a facilitator so that they can also feel that they're part of the group. So if you're a manager, for example, I would also encourage people to play along with their teams, because then they feel more connected and then this hierarchy is lost. So with the help of a facilitator, your team can really make wonders. And then it also can be added organically to your team's processes anyway. So if you have a brainstorming session, a team event, an end-of-year celebration, a way of working, brainstorming, or a retrospective, it can be tied to, the normal working procedures, but in a way that is more engaging.
And do I hear it correctly that you, as a side gig, you're also offering your services as a facilitator?
Exactly.
And is there a website for the various resources you mentioned where people can identify, okay, well, these are pieces that are really interesting for us and we can apply them?
Yeah, exactly. So I have a LinkedIn page and a website called teamified.com. It's a combination of team and gamified. So people can look it up, or in my LinkedIn profile, they can find the links. And then there I also describe my services, my approach, and also I have included some blog articles about the use cases that I have already tried and tested out, and some videos and pictures as well. So people can also see how it feels like.
Brilliant. Well, thank you, Emy. It was very nice having this conversation. And I feel it's a very important topic. I feel it's also the right timing, because more and more organizations are very open and aware of the importance of play and letting our hooves loose, letting our hair loose, maybe our hooves loose a bit as well. Speaking of horses, thank you for being here, for your participation, and thank you for the viewers who are watching this. And give us a like, a subscribe, give us a rating, and hope to see you next week.
Thank you so much. It was a true pleasure.